Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome everyone to our first lecture on English 443, the modern novel. The title of the course may raise many questions to us, or for those of you who are not familiar with the English literary forms. When we say modern novel, does this mean that we have an old novel? Okay, does this mean that we have an old novel? What is the difference? What do we mean by modern novel? All of these questions we will try to answer in our lecture. We will start by giving a brief definition, a brief history of when the English novel started. Then we will move on to the definition of the novel, and then we'll move on to definition of the modern novel and some of its characteristics. Okay? A brief history of the novel. Before we start, we have to understand that telling stories was a pastime for humans since the dawn of man. People would gather around, tell stories to amuse themselves, to entertain themselves, to educate themselves. Okay, so telling stories was there. It was an oral tradition where shepherds would gather around to tell stories to each other, to entertain themselves, or either to educate themselves or to amuse. Now, the English novel as a genre, as a literary type, as a literary kind, a kind of literature, started in the late 17th century and early 18th century. So, the English novel started in the end of the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century. Writers like Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, and Samuel Richardson, who wrote Pamela, were considered the first people to write the English novel, and their work, Robinson Crusoe and Pamela, were the first novel in English literature. Now, if we go on to say we have a question, let's write a brief account of the history of the English novel, or the start of the English novel. I would say the answer would be as go. The English novel as a genre emerged in the late 17th century and early 18th century. Writers like Daniel Defoe and Samuel Richardson were the first who wrote the novel, the form of the novel. Daniel Defoe wrote Robinson Crusoe, Samuel Richardson wrote Pamela. The answer would be like this. So what is a novel? I mean, what do we mean by a novel? What is, when we say novel, what does it mean? Okay? What do we mean when we say novel, and what are its features? Of course, I have to remind you that I will be a little bit brief and to the point, and will avoid any in-depth definitions of the novel. The novel, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a fictitious prose narrative or tale of a considerable length, now usually one long enough to fill the one or more volumes, in which characters and actions, representatives of the real life of the past or present times, are portrayed in a plot of more or less complexity. So again, a novel is a fictitious prose narrative or tale of considerable length, in which characters and actions representative of the real life of the past or present times are portrayed in a plot of more or less complexity. So as you can see, one feature of it is fictitious. When we say fictitious, we mean it is fiction. It is not real. It is not real. It is made up of the imagination of the writer. So it is a fictitious prose. It is written in prose. We know that poetry is written in verse, so the novel is written in prose. Narrative. It deals with narration, with telling a story, a tale of considerable length. There is a length for the novel. To define it and to distinguish it from other literary genres like the short story and the novella. Usually, the novel is a work of fiction that is more than 50,000 words. More than 50,000 words. Now, in this fictitious prose narrative, what do we have? We have characters and actions. So the characters and the actions are two elements of the novel. What do? They represent. They are not real, but they represent. They are similar to events and characters that are there in real life in the past, or in the present time, maybe also in the future. So these characters are presented to us, introduced through a plot, an arrangement of events, a sequence of a more or less complexity. The plot can be very complicated, or it can be simple, or it can be a simple plot. Okay, so main elements in this definition: novel is a fictitious prose narrative. It is fiction written in prose, and it tells a story. It has in which characters, and it is of a certain length. It has characters who makes actions that are similar to those made in real life, and these characters portray a real life, either in the past, the present, or maybe in the future. And all of these events happens through a plot. The plot can be simple or complex. The plot can be simple or complex. So now we have the modern novel, and I raised the question in the beginning: does this mean that we have an old novel? Well, if we look at the novel, we have the 18th century novel, the 19th century novel, the Victorian novel, the American. So the modern novel, contemporary novel, the modern novel does concern itself with a certain era, a certain time and century. The modern novel concerns itself with the 20th century, and in the 20th century literature, there are two phases, okay, that were divided by World War II. There is the modern literature, okay, which is from 1900 to 1914. Sorry, from 1900 or 1914 to 1945. This era, these dates, the years between these days, the work of literature written in it is called modern literature. And contemporary literature from 1945 to the present time, to our day, 2012, is concerned. It's we call it contemporary. That it means it is in our time. So modern novel is during the first phase of the 20th century. Okay, it is the novel written in the first phase of the 20th century, meaning from 1900 to 1945. So these are the dates. Many events happened during the 20th centuries that influence the way people think and the way people live. Some of these events were World War I. Many people were killed in that war. The Great Depression, in which problems with the economy that caused the loss of jobs and poverty. World War II, including the Holocaust and the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. In World War II, many people died in this war and were killed during the war. And as you can see, an atomic bomb was thrown on Japan, which killed a lot of people. The Cold War between Russia and America. The launch of Sputnik and the advent of space flight. Sputnik is an artificial satellite. So during the 20th century, people started to go into space. Okay, they went to the moon. They started to explore other planets. The end of colonialism and the rise of the third world countries. During the 19th century, many countries were colonized, were ruled by other countries. England ruled many countries like India, some African countries, some Arab countries, France that did the same. So during the 20th century, all the colonialism ended. The reshaping of the face of the world, we have communism, another movement that challenged the ideas that were there during the previous centuries. So men and people in the 20th century were confronted with emptiness and doubts. They had many doubts. They weren't 100% sure, okay? They had doubts about the existence of God. Some people didn't believe that there is a God. The primacy of the human race and creation. They start saying that humans are the best creatures that God created, the supremacy, priority of reason in human affairs. We are, as humans, we use our minds to think, we use reason, we don't do just jump into rash decisions. The perception that life is self-evidently worth living. So everyone is thinking that we need to live life. The nature of reality. They started to question reality. Is this what's happening now is real to us? A feature of the modern novel, the tendency, the urge has been to subordinate action to psychology. They relate action to psychology. We are more interested in the psychology of the characters, to find the central theme in the mental and spiritual development of the characters rather than their physical adventures. This is not an action movie where the most important thing is just hitting, jumping, or no. In the modern novel, the writers were concerned themselves with the psychology, with the way people think, with the motives that make them work in a certain situation, with their beliefs that make them behave in this matter. So the modern novel occupied itself with these features or with these elements, psychology, the way the character, so the way people think, the way opinions are shaped, whether individual or collective, whether through individual person, the way one person thinks, or collectively in a whole society, the way a whole society thinks. Now, girls, we come to the end of this brief lecture. If you have any questions, we can raise them up in class. I hope you enjoy it, and till next time, I wish you a pleasant time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.